I never imagined that opening my home to my sister-in-law for her baby shower would spark a chain of events so twisted that it would ultimately redefine every relationship I had taken for granted. Yet here I am, sharing every detail of how betrayal, manipulation, and carefully executed revenge reshaped my life in ways I never foresaw. I've always prided myself on being a generous, accommodating person. My marriage had its ups and downs, but I always believed that family came first. When my sister-in-law Denise asked if she could use my house for her baby shower, I saw it as an opportunity to help her during one of the most significant moments of her life. I was excited to share my home, a place filled with fond memories, with someone who was about to embark on a new journey into motherhood. I pictured a joyous event with friends, family, laughter, and the promise of a fresh start. As preparations began, I noticed Denise's demeanor change subtly. She started to act as if my house wasn't hers to borrow, but rather a stage where she could showcase her worth to everyone, especially to her new, wealthy friend, Karen. Karen, with her expensive tastes and a reputation for social climbing, had quickly become the person Denise was trying to impress. I observed Denise's shift in priorities as she meticulously arranged the baby shower to emphasize her own grandeur and status. Invitations were sent out with a tone that bordered on boastful, and the decorations, though elegant, felt more like a display of affluence than a warm celebration. The night before the event, as I was putting the finishing touches on the living room, I overheard a heated conversation between Denise and her husband, Mark. I was in the kitchen, lost in thought about whether I'd inadvertently overstepped any boundaries, when I caught snippets of their argument. Denise, in a voice laced with condescension, was detailing a plan that left Mark dumbfounded. She intended to upgrade her life by pushing me, her own kin, out of the picture. Apparently, the shower wasn't about celebrating the impending arrival of her child at all. It was about securing a new status symbol in the form of Karen's admiration. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Denise had planned not only to humiliate me, but to essentially expel me from the very house I had offered out of kindness. The realization that I had been deceived stung like a slap in the face. I was furious, but I also knew that reacting impulsively could ruin everything. I needed to be methodical. I spent that night wide awake in my bedroom, meticulously retracing every conversation, every detail from the moment Denise had first mentioned the shower. I recalled her subtle hints, her offhand remarks about wanting something better, and even her occasional dismissive tone whenever I expressed any concern. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the plan had been hatched long before the baby shower was even set in motion. The next morning, while the sun was just beginning to peek through the blinds, I resolved that I wasn't going to be a victim. I started gathering evidence, a series of texts, emails, and recordings that, piece by piece, painted a picture of manipulation and deceit. I combed through old messages where Denise had complimented me for my generosity, only to later shift her tone into something that smacked of entitlement and disdain. Each piece of evidence made it increasingly clear that her intentions were far from pure. She wasn't planning to celebrate life. She was planning to usurp it. I decided to confront the situation not with anger, but with cold, hard facts. My plan was simple: expose the truth to Mark, her unsuspecting husband. Mark had always been the quieter one in their marriage, more reserved, more likely to trust the narrative put forth by his wife rather than digging for the truth. But I knew that once he saw what was really happening behind the facade, he wouldn't stand by idly. Before I took that step, I meticulously crafted a timeline of events, attaching each piece of evidence with clarity. I had screenshots of texts where Denise blatantly boasted about how the shower was all about making an impression on Karen. I had voicemails where she mentioned how useless I was becoming in her eyes and how her plans for a new, more affluent lifestyle wouldn't be possible with me around. I even recorded a conversation where she inadvertently revealed that she had orchestrated the entire event with one objective: to be admired by the rich and powerful. Every word, every image was laid out like a puzzle waiting to be solved. That afternoon, after the baby shower had reached its peak of pomp and circumstance, I invited Mark over for a private talk. I chose a quiet corner of my living room, away from the chatter of guests and the festive music, and waited for him to arrive. When he did, I could see that his eyes carried the weight of the day, exhaustion, confusion, and a hint of something else that I couldn't immediately decipher. I handed him a thick folder filled with the documented truth, speaking in a calm, measured tone as I laid out every detail of Denise's betrayal. I explained how I had let her use my house in good faith, only to be met with a cunning plan to force me out for her own benefit. At first, Mark was hesitant. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the lines of text, the images of the conversations. I could tell that his mind was racing, trying to reconcile the loving wife he thought he knew with the cold, calculating person before him. I didn't allow him any time to gather his thoughts. I pressed on, explaining every step of Denise's elaborate scheme. I made it clear that I wasn't interested in forgiveness or reconciliation. I was there to expose the truth and ensure that justice, in its purest form, was served. Mark's reaction was not immediate anger, it was shock, and then a deep-seated realization that he had been manipulated. He remembered moments of subtle cruelty, offhand remarks, and the gradual shift in Denise's behavior. I reminded him of a specific incident, a seemingly minor argument over household expenses, that, in hindsight, had been a clear indicator of her ambitions. The more he listened, the more I saw his eyes fill with regret and a dawning understanding of the betrayal that had unfolded in his own home. Once I had finished presenting the evidence, Mark was silent for what felt like an eternity. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Finally, he looked up at me, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "I can't believe I was so blind," he admitted. "I trusted her, and I trusted you." I nodded, my expression resolute, knowing that this conversation marked the turning point in our lives. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about exposing the rot at the core of her ambition. In the days that followed, Mark confronted Denise with the evidence. The confrontation was both quiet and explosive, a private storm that erupted behind closed doors. I won't recount every detail, but I can say that the discussion ended with Denise's facade crumbling. Her initial denials turned into desperate justifications, but nothing could undo the reality that had been presented. Mark, in a rare moment of assertiveness, told her that her behavior was not only unacceptable, but had irreparably damaged the trust between them. I wasn't there during the confrontation, but later, when Mark reached out to thank me, I sensed that the real transformation had already begun. It wasn't long before the repercussions rippled outwards. Denise's behavior became increasingly erratic and desperate. I started receiving messages from mutual friends who expressed shock and dismay at her recent conduct. It seemed that her plan to impress Karen had backfired spectacularly, leaving her isolated and discredited. The social circles that once revered her for her perceived sophistication and charm now whispered behind her back, and her once loyal friends began distancing themselves. The ultimate blow came when Mark made a decision that shocked everyone. He filed for divorce. I remember the day he called me, his voice steady but filled with a profound sadness. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "I trusted her, and she betrayed not only our marriage, but our entire life together." The finality in his tone was something I had long prepared myself for. It was the culmination of months of manipulation and deceit. In that moment, I realized that my carefully executed plan had achieved more than just exposing the truth. It had forced Denise to face the consequences of her actions head-on. Even as I reflected on what had happened, I couldn't help but feel a complex mix of emotions. There was satisfaction in knowing that justice had been served and that I had reclaimed control over my life. But there was also a lingering sadness, a mourning for the family dynamics that had been forever altered by deceit and betrayal. I had expected gratitude for my intervention, but what I got was a silent acknowledgement from Mark that nothing could restore what had been lost. Nonetheless, I held no grudges. I had made it clear from the beginning that forgiveness was not part of my equation. Denise had made her choices, and now she would have to live with the consequences. In the aftermath, life began to settle into a new normal. Mark and I occasionally met for coffee, sometimes for a quiet drink after work, sharing memories of better times and cautiously discussing the uncertain future. The divorce, while painful, brought with it a sense of liberation. Mark started to rebuild his life, one step at a time, and even though the scars of betrayal were still fresh, he slowly began to rediscover the strength he had lost. Denise, on the other hand, found herself isolated. Her attempt to elevate her status had resulted in an outcome she never anticipated: divorce, social ostracism, and the heavy responsibility of raising her child alone. I kept my distance, not out of malice, but because I had no desire to be entangled in the toxic aftermath of her choices. I focused on rebuilding my own life, restoring the sanctity of my home that had once been overshadowed by her schemes. I spent time investing in my passions, reconnecting with friends who had always valued honesty over ambition. I made small improvements around the house, each project a quiet reminder that my home was truly mine, a place of refuge and authenticity, not a stage for someone else's deceptions. Looking back, I realized that my decision to let Denise use my house was made out of a genuine desire to help a family member. I believed in second chances, in the power of goodwill. But when that goodwill was taken for granted, when it was exploited for selfish gain, I learned that there is a fine line between kindness and naivety. I had to draw that line firmly in the sand. By exposing the truth, I not only preserved my dignity, but I also helped someone else see the reality that had been masked by carefully constructed lies. There were moments after the confrontation when I questioned if I had done the right thing. The familiar pang of regret would sometimes creep in, questioning whether my actions had irreparably shattered the possibility of reconciliation. But every time I thought back to Denise's callous planning and her plan to discard me for the sake of a flashy display, I knew that I had been right. Some betrayals leave scars that run too deep to ever heal completely. It wasn't a matter of forgiveness, it was a matter of survival, of standing up for oneself in a world that often rewards duplicity and punishes authenticity. In the weeks that followed the divorce, the community buzzed with whispers and judgment. I found solace in the fact that many recognized the truth of the situation. Friends who had been wary of Denise's behavior all along reached out, expressing relief that someone had finally called her out. I wasn't looking for validation, but it was comforting to see that justice, however slow, had a way of prevailing. Mark, too, began sharing his own regrets and lessons learned. He told me how he had neglected to see the signs, how he had allowed himself to be blinded by the allure of a seemingly perfect life. His journey was painful and fraught with introspection, but it also marked the beginning of a newfound resolve to live with integrity. As for me, I emerged from this ordeal changed, yet steadfast in my values. I had faced a situation where the very people I thought I could trust chose to betray me, and instead of succumbing to bitterness or despair, I took action. I reclaimed my power by holding someone accountable for their actions, proving that deceit would not go unpunished. In the quiet moments of reflection, I often think about the delicate balance between kindness and naivety, and I remind myself that while it's important to help others, it's equally important to protect one's own peace of mind. In the end, the experience taught me that every choice we make has consequences, not only for ourselves, but for those around us. Denise's actions, driven by vanity and the desire for social validation, left her with a life that was far removed from the dreams she once had. Her isolation, her struggle as a single mother, and the remnants of her shattered marriage stand as a testament to the fact that ambition, when tainted with deceit, only leads to ruin. Mark, too, was left to pick up the pieces of a relationship that had been built on false pretenses, and while his journey toward healing was just beginning, I took solace in the fact that he had finally been awakened to the truth. Now, as I sit in my quiet home, a home that has weathered storms of betrayal and emerged stronger, I can't help but feel a sense of vindication. Not because I relished in her downfall, but because I proved that integrity matters. I chose to stand up for myself when the easy path would have been to forgive and forget. I chose to expose the truth even when it meant dismantling a facade that had long concealed the harsh reality. And in doing so, I not only reclaimed my home and my peace of mind, but also sent a clear message. Betrayal is not something that can be glossed over with apologies or half-hearted compromises. There are days when I still hear whispers of what happened, tales of a baby shower that turned into an expose of one woman's greed and another's quiet determination. I listen to those stories with a calm detachment, knowing that the truth of what transpired is etched in every piece of evidence, every tear shed in solitude, and every conversation that led to that fateful day of reckoning. I have no illusions that life is free of conflict or betrayal, but I have learned that the true measure of one's character is not in how many times they are wronged, but in how they choose to respond. For me, the choice was clear. I refused to be the silent victim of manipulation. I refused to allow someone else's ambitions to dictate my life. And so, with each day that passes, I continue to live by the principle that justice, when served with a steady hand and an unwavering heart, can transform even the deepest wounds into lessons of resilience and strength. In sharing my story, I don't seek sympathy or adulation. I simply hope that those who read these words understand that sometimes the path to reclaiming one's life involves confronting the harshest realities of betrayal head-on. I learned that forgiveness is not always the answer. Sometimes, the most powerful act is to expose the truth and let the consequences unfold naturally. Denise made her choices, and now she faces a future where every moment is a reminder of the price of her ambition. As I continue to rebuild my life, I am reminded daily that our homes are not just physical spaces, but sanctuaries where truth and integrity reside. I have fortified my home and my heart, ensuring that no one ever dares to manipulate or betray the trust that I hold dear. And while the scars of this ordeal may never fully fade, they serve as a constant reminder that I have the strength to stand alone, to fight back when necessary, and to never compromise on the principles that define who I am. This isn't a story of dramatic romance or overblown tragedy. It's a story of real people making choices that have real consequences. It's a story of betrayal, yes, but also one of empowerment and the unwavering pursuit of justice. I let my guard down once, believing that kindness would be reciprocated, only to find that sometimes kindness is mistaken for weakness. And in that moment of reckoning, I chose to fight, not for revenge that burns with the flames of uncontrolled fury, but for a justice that is precise, measured, and irrevocable. So here I am, sharing my journey in the hope that it reminds others to be cautious with their trust, to always value their own worth, and to never let someone else's ambition overshadow their own right to a peaceful, honest life. My story is one of many in a world where betrayal is all too common, but it is also a testament to the idea that when you stand up for yourself, when you expose the truth, you create a ripple effect that can change lives for the better. I look back now and see that the day I decided to expose Denise was the day I truly reclaimed my identity. I reclaimed my home, my self-respect, and the unyielding belief that I deserved to be treated with honesty and fairness. And though I may have lost a part of what I thought was a family, I gained the strength to forge ahead, unburdened by the weight of deceit. In the quiet moments of reflection, when I sit by my window and watch the world go by, I am reminded that every betrayal, every act of manipulation, is an opportunity, a harsh but invaluable lesson. And as I continue on this journey, I carry with me the unshakable truth that standing up for oneself is the most important act of self-love and dignity one can ever perform. This is not a tale of dramatic outbursts or tearful reconciliations. It is the raw, unvarnished account of how I reclaimed my life. It is a reminder that no matter how deep the betrayal, there is always a path forward, a path defined by resilience, truth, and the courage to say, enough is enough. And for anyone who finds themselves in the midst of manipulation and deceit, know that you have the power to expose the truth, to reclaim your dignity, and to live a life defined by integrity rather than regret. My home remains a sanctuary, a symbol of my strength, and a testament to the fact that betrayal can be met not with forgiveness, but with a resolute commitment to truth and justice. The echoes of that fateful day still reverberate in every corner, not as a reminder of pain, but as a beacon of the power that lies within when one chooses to stand up and fight back. In the end, life is not about avoiding betrayal, but about learning how to respond to it in a way that ensures you remain true to yourself. I've learned that sometimes the most significant victories come not from grand, dramatic gestures, but from the quiet, calculated steps taken in defense of one's own integrity. And as I move forward, I do so with the knowledge that I have not only survived betrayal, I have triumphed over it. Looking back on everything that transpired, I realized that the journey was as transformative as it was painful. My decision to expose the truth changed not just my own life, but also the lives of those who were unwittingly entangled in Denise's web of lies. Mark's awakening, the community's shift in perspective, and even the quiet whispers of regret that followed Denise all serve as reminders that every action has consequences, and that sometimes the cost of ambition is the loss of one's soul. I share this story not to revel in the downfall of another, but to highlight the importance of honesty, self-respect, and the unwavering courage it takes to stand up against manipulation. In a world where betrayal can come in many forms, I have learned that the most powerful form of revenge is simply living your truth, undaunted, unashamed, and unapologetic. And as I continue to forge my path forward, I do so with a heart that remains guarded, yet hopeful, a spirit that is resilient, and a determination that is unbreakable. This is my story, a story of betrayal, exposure, and the ultimate reclamation of my life. It is a story that I hope serves as both a cautionary tale and a beacon of empowerment for anyone who has ever felt undervalued or manipulated. In sharing it, I reaffirm that even in the darkest moments, there is a strength within us all, waiting to be awakened by the call of justice. And so, I carry on, not with bitterness, but with the knowledge that I have done what needed to be done, and that my home and my life will forever remain a sanctuary of truth and integrity.